Imagine walking into your attic one night and finding a photograph that shouldn't exist. A smiling classroom full of children who disappeared 27 years ago. And there, standing right in the middle,
is your son. Before we dive into this chilling mystery,
don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kindness Tales Live for more true life stories that touch the heart and challenge what we think we know. For 27 long years, the town of Ravenshade carried a wound no time could heal. One autumn morning in 1998, a whole third-grade class, 23 children and their teacher, vanished from Willow Creek Elementary without a trace. No bodies, no footprints, no answers. Parents had grown old, clutching fading photographs. Some had moved away to escape the whispers, while others remained trapped in the cycle of grief and denial. Among those who stayed was Mara Collins, a mother whose laughter had died the same day her 8-year-old son, Eli, disappeared with his classmates. Mara never remarried, never left the old house that still smelled faintly of Eli's crayons and peanut butter sandwiches. Every year on October 3rd, the day of the disappearance, she placed fresh white lilies by the school's memorial plaque. It was her ritual of remembrance, until one rainy evening, a storm knocked out the power and led her to the attic where everything changed. As she fumbled through the dim glow of her flashlight, searching for candles, her hand brushed against an old, dust-caked box labeled Eli's School Memories. Her heart squeezed as she opened it. Inside were finger paintings, a paper airplane, and his little red cap. But beneath it all, something unfamiliar. A glossy photograph she had never seen before. It was a class picture. 23 children, their teacher, and right there in the middle, Eli's unmistakable grin. But something was wrong. Her breath caught when she saw the date printed on the corner. October 3rd, 2024. That was today's date. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks. The colors looked too vivid, the edges too sharp, like it had just been developed. Her trembling fingers traced Eli's face. Older, not the little boy who vanished in 1998. He looked 12, maybe 13. The same mischievous sparkle in his eyes, the same smile she'd memorized but aged beyond the years he was taken. Panic rose in her chest as thunder rattled the windows. No, this isn't possible, she whispered, clutching the photo close. She turned it over and then froze again. In neat, unfamiliar handwriting were the words, "We're not gone. We're waiting for you." She stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, landing on the wall where Eli's drawings hung crookedly. In that moment, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not grief, but a pulse of hope mixed with dread. Could Eli still be alive? Could any of them? The next morning, she brought the photo to the police station, her voice trembling as she tried to explain. Officer Daniels, the same man who'd investigated the case all those years ago, stared at her with weary eyes. "Mrs. Collins, this isn't funny," he muttered, sliding the photo back across the desk. But when he looked down again, his expression changed. His lips parted slightly. "Wait, this can't be. That's my son in the back row." The officer's hand shook. His son, Connor Daniels, had also vanished that day. The two stared at each other, hearts pounding as the room seemed to spin. Mara whispered, "You see it too, don't you?" He nodded slowly, his face pale. "Yes, but how can they be older? How can a picture from today show them like this?" Outside, the rain began to fall again, softly tapping against the window pane like fingers from another world. Mara gripped the photo tightly, feeling a strange pull. A sense that this was just the beginning. Somewhere, somehow, Eli was calling her, and she wasn't going to stop until she found out why. Mara didn't sleep that night. The photograph sat on her kitchen table, lit only by the dim orange glow of the streetlight outside. Every few minutes she'd look at it again, half expecting it to change, to vanish, to reveal it had all been a cruel hallucination. But the faces never moved. Eli's eyes still gleamed, frozen in that impossible, ageless smile. Across town, Officer Daniels had taken a copy to the precinct's lab for analysis, though both of them knew no machine could explain something like this. By morning, the air in Mara's house felt heavier, charged. She made coffee, hands trembling so hard she spilled half of it on the counter. That's when she heard it, a faint sound from upstairs. A tap, tap, tap like tiny knuckles against wood. She froze, listening. It came again, rhythmic and deliberate, from the attic. The same place she'd found the photograph. Slowly, heart hammering, she climbed the creaking stairs, whispering Eli's name as if afraid the silence would swallow it whole. The attic door groaned open. The air was cold, unnaturally so. Her breath fogged in front of her face. She scanned the room, flashlight beam cutting through the dust, and then she saw it. The box. The same box she'd left on the floor was now open again. Inside, the items were rearranged. The paper airplane rested on top, its tip pointing toward the far wall. It wasn't random. Someone or something wanted her to look. Mara followed the direction of the paper airplane. Her eyes landed on a section of the wooden floor that looked slightly raised. Kneeling, she pressed her palm against it. It moved, and just a little, and beneath her hand came that same tap, tap, tap. Her heart slammed in her chest. She pried at the board with trembling fingers until it gave way, revealing a narrow gap filled with dust and something metallic. She pulled it out, an old cassette tape labeled in childish handwriting, Mrs. H. Class Time Capsule, 1998. Her blood ran cold. The name Mrs. H. belonged to Mrs. Hellman, the teacher who disappeared with the class. Mara's hands shook as she found Eli's old cassette player in the box and inserted the tape. Static filled the air, then faint laughter. Children laughing. Her breath caught. "Okay, class," came a warm, familiar voice, Mrs. Hellman's. "We're going to record a message for the future. Everyone say hi." The chorus of voices that followed sent chills down Mara's spine. She could hear Eli, his giggle distinct among the others. Then the laughter faded. Silence, and then a whisper. At first she thought it was static, but the more she listened, the clearer it became. A small, trembling voice saying, "Mom, find the light under the school." The tape clicked off. Mara dropped the player, clutching her chest as tears welled in her eyes. That was Eli's voice, no doubt. Not a recording from 1998. It sounded recent, desperate, alive. She stumbled back, her mind racing. "The light under the school," she whispered. Could that mean something beneath Willow Creek Elementary? Without thinking, she grabbed her coat, the photograph, and her keys. By the time she reached the school grounds, the sky was gray and swollen with rain. The building had been closed for years, boarded up after the tragedy. The playground was rusted, the swings creaked in the wind. But as she walked toward the main entrance, something flickered in one of the shattered windows. A flash of light, like a lantern swinging in the dark. "Mara," a voice called behind her. She turned. Officer Daniels jogged toward her, holding a folder. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, catching his breath. "The lab ran a thermal scan on that photograph. You won't believe this, the ink isn't ink. It's some kind of bioluminescent residue that reacts to light frequencies." She blinked, confused. "Meaning what?" "Meaning," he said, lowering his voice. "Whoever made that photo wanted you to bring it here." The same wavelength was detected under this building. Together, they pried open the school's front doors. The smell of damp wood and decay filled the air. The corridors were still lined with faded drawings and broken lockers. Every step echoed too loud, too hollow. When they reached the old classroom, room 3B, Mara stopped dead. On the chalkboard, written in fresh white chalk, were the words, "We're waiting, Mom." Her knees nearly gave out. Daniels raised his flashlight toward the board, and for a split second, the beam flickered over something on the floor. A small footprint in fresh dust. Child-sized, recent, and not alone. Mara whispered through trembling lips, "He's here." The air inside room 3B felt alive, thick with the scent of damp earth and memories no one wanted to remember. The walls seemed to hum with silence, a strange vibration that made the tiny hairs on Mara's arms rise. She moved closer to the chalkboard, her trembling fingers brushing over the words, "We're waiting, Mom." The chalk was still soft, smudging easily under her touch. "Daniels," she whispered, "this was written not long ago." "Hours, maybe." He nodded, jaw tight. "We'll need backup," he muttered. But before he could reach for his radio, Mara stopped him. Her eyes had locked onto something near the back of the room. The faint outline of a square carved into the floorboards, half hidden under old desks. She knelt and brushed away the dust. "It's a hatch," she said. "Help me." Together they pried it open with a rusted metal rod. A gust of cold, stale air rushed upward. Below them yawned a narrow shaft leading into darkness. Old wooden steps disappeared into the black. "This wasn't in the school blueprints," Daniels murmured. Mara didn't hesitate. She shone her flashlight down and began to descend. If my son's down there, I'm not waiting for a team. The deeper they went, the colder it became. The smell of mold and wet stone filled the air. After several minutes, the stairs opened into a low-ceilinged corridor made of brick and concrete, an underground passage. Strange symbols were scratched into the walls. Circles intersected with triangles, spirals, and numbers that seemed to glow faintly in the light. "These markings, they're fresh," Daniels whispered. At the end of the corridor stood a rusted metal door. On it, written in chalky white, were the words, 1998. Mara's heart skipped. She pushed the door open, and a sound like wind rushing through a tunnel filled their ears. Inside was a large chamber lined with desks, shelves, and torn textbooks, all perfectly preserved as if the class had never left. On the chalkboard was the date of their disappearance, October 3rd, 1998. Mara's flashlight trembled in her grip. "This is impossible." Daniels scanned the room, noticing faint light seeping from a crack in the far wall. "Over there," he said, moving closer. He pressed against the stone and a section slid inward, revealing another passage, this one narrower and pulsing with an eerie blue glow. Mara followed him, her heart pounding like thunder. The light grew stronger until they stepped into a small circular chamber. At its center stood an old-school projector, humming faintly, surrounded by scattered photos and notebooks. A reel of film lay threaded through it. On the ground, etched in chalk, were two words, "Watch us." Daniels hesitated. "This feels wrong," he muttered, but Mara had already flipped the switch. The projector whirred to life, casting flickering images onto the curved wall. The faces of the missing children, laughing, running on the playground, eating lunch. But then the footage changed. The image distorted, colors bleeding together until the screen showed something else entirely. The children sitting in the same underground classroom, their eyes glowing faintly in the blue light. They weren't smiling now. They looked scared. In the back row, Eli stood up and looked straight into the camera. "Mom," he said, his voice echoing eerily through the room. "We didn't go anywhere. The bell rang, and we just fell. Time stopped for us." Mara gasped, tears flooding her eyes. "Eli," she whispered, touching the projection as if she could reach him. The film flickered again, and Eli's voice dropped to a whisper. "Find the light. Mom, bring us back before it goes out." Then the reel burned, melting into smoke. The projector shut down. Daniels turned to Mara, his face pale. If that was real, then there's something under here keeping them trapped. Some kind of anomaly, or I don't even know what to call it. Before she could respond, a low hum filled the chamber. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, pulsing like veins of light. The ground vibrated beneath their feet. From the doorway, faint laughter echoed. Children's laughter, distant yet close. Mara gripped Daniel's arm. "They're still here," she breathed. The laughter grew louder until it was all around them, overlapping voices calling her name. "Mom! Mom!" Help us would, then silence. The lights faded. The hum stopped. And from behind the projector, something moved. A small shadow darting out of sight. Mara's flashlight caught a glimpse of a child-sized shoe print on the dusty floor, wet as if freshly made. She turned to Daniels. "We need to go deeper," she said, voice steady now, filled with resolve. "If time stopped for them, then maybe it hasn't stopped for me." The tunnels stretched deeper than either of them imagined. As Mara and Officer Daniels followed the faint echo of dripping water, the glow from their flashlights revealed fragments of something unnatural. Old toys scattered on the ground, pages from school notebooks floating in puddles, and strange flickers of light that moved just out of sight. The further they went, the stronger the feeling that time itself was bending around them. Mara could hear faint whispers every few steps. Sometimes Eli's voice, sometimes others she didn't recognize. They came to a massive chamber carved from stone, circular and vast with tall columns supporting the ceiling. In the center stood what looked like a giant bell, old, rusted, and suspended by thick chains. Beneath it, a ring of symbols pulsed faintly with that same blue light. Daniels approached cautiously. "This must be what they meant by the light under the school," he said. "But what is it?" Mara stared at the bell. Her hands trembled. "I don't know," she whispered. "But if that's what's keeping them trapped, we have to set them free." Daniels nodded. But before they could move closer, the air shifted, thickening, humming, vibrating with unseen energy. The ground quivered under their feet, and suddenly the bell began to sway on its own. The chains rattled. A low, haunting sound filled the air like 1,000 distant voices humming in unison. Then from the far side of the chamber, shadows began to move. Mara froze. Out of the darkness stepped children, faint, translucent shapes glowing faintly blue. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow yet familiar. She recognized them instantly, the missing students. "Eli?" she called out, her voice cracking. A smaller figure moved forward from the group. It was him, older than he should have been, just like in the photograph. "Mom." His voice echoed softly, both everywhere and nowhere at once. "You found us." Tears filled her eyes. "I never stopped looking," she whispered, stepping closer, but Daniels held her back gently. The officer's voice trembled. "Mrs. Collins, careful. We don't know what's keeping them like this." Eli shook his head. "It's the bell. When it rang, everything stopped. We didn't mean to touch it. Mrs. Hellman tried to stop us, but it pulled us in. The light kept us alive, but it's fading." Daniels frowned, scanning the ancient structure. "It's electromagnetic," he murmured, noticing faint sparks where the chains met the ceiling. "Some kind of energy field, maybe temporal distortion." Mara didn't care about science. All she saw was her son, trapped between worlds. "Tell me how to bring you home," she begged. Eli looked at her, his form flickering faintly. "You have to break the silence. Make it ring one last time. The bell will open the hour that's been lost." Daniel stared at her, disbelief and fear in his eyes. "If that thing rings again, it could collapse this entire place, or worse. We don't know what kind of energy it'll unleash." But Mara's mind was already made up. She stepped toward the bell, gripping the rusted chain with both hands. The moment she touched it, a surge of cold energy shot through her, freezing her breath. The children's voices grew louder, pleading. "Mom, hurry!" Daniel shouted, "Mara, stop!" But it was too late. With one desperate swing, she yanked the chain. The bell rang. The sound was deafening, a deep, mournful tone that echoed endlessly through the tunnels. The air rippled with light, the walls trembling as a brilliant flash exploded from the center of the chamber. Mara shielded her eyes as the blue light turned white, enveloping everything. When the light finally dimmed, she opened her eyes, and the chamber was gone. She stood in a classroom bathed in sunlight. The walls were new, the chalkboard clean. Children's laughter filled the air. Mara spun around, stunned. The desks were filled, the children alive, and there was Eli sitting at his desk, drawing just as he had 27 years ago. She rushed to him, tears streaming down her face. "Eli!" He looked up, smiling. "Hi, Mom, you're early." Before she could answer, the bell above the door rang again, this time faint, echoing, distorted. Mara turned to see Daniel standing by the door, but he looked older, exhausted, as if he'd aged decades. "Mara," he said softly, "you're not supposed to be here." She blinked. "What do you mean?" Daniel's voice broke. "You freed them, but time took you instead." Mara turned back to Eli, but he was fading, his colors dissolving into light. The classroom blurred, melting away like smoke in the wind. The last thing she heard was her son's voice whispering, "Thank you, Mom." Then everything went dark. When Mara opened her eyes again, the world was quiet. Too quiet. The air felt heavy, like she was underwater. She blinked several times until her vision cleared. She wasn't in the tunnels anymore. Instead, she found herself standing in a field of tall golden grass under a sky painted in shades of lavender and gold. There were no buildings, no sounds, just the wind whispering softly through the grass. She turned slowly, confusion flooding her chest. "Eli?" She called out. No answer. Her voice echoed into the open air, fading quickly. Then she saw it. Far in the distance, a small schoolhouse standing alone, its bell tower gleaming in the sunlight. Something deep inside her told her to go there. Her steps felt light, effortless. She reached the school in what felt like moments, though time seemed strange here. The door creaked open as she pushed it, revealing a familiar sight. Room 3B, perfectly restored. Desks neatly aligned, sunlight streaming through spotless windows, chalk dust glimmering in the air. It was as though the tragedy had never happened. At the front of the room stood Mrs. Hellman, the teacher who had vanished all those years ago. Her face was gentle, her eyes kind but tired. "Mara," she said softly as if expecting her.
You made it. Mara's heart raced.
"Where am I? Where's my son? Is he here?" Mrs. Hellman smiled faintly. "You freed them. The children are back in their world. They woke up in 1998, confused but alive. Time healed itself when the bell rang again." Mara's breath caught. "Then why am I still here?" The teacher's eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "Every door must have a keeper. Someone had to stay behind to close it. You opened the lost hour, Mara, and now you guard it." The words sank like stones in her chest. She looked around, realizing that everything shimmered faintly like a reflection on water. The truth struck her. She wasn't alive anymore, not in the world she knew. She was part of this in-between place, the bridge between time and memory. Her knees gave out and she sank to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I just wanted to see him again," she whispered. Mrs. Hellman knelt beside her, resting a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did, and he'll always carry that moment. Your love saved them all. Sometimes the greatest act of a mother's love is letting go." Outside, the bell tower began to toll softly. Each chime sent ripples of light through the air, and through those ripples Mara saw glimpses of the world she'd left behind. Eli, now grown, walking with a backpack through the restored school grounds. He paused, looking up at the old bell tower. He smiled faintly, as if hearing something familiar in the wind. "Mom?" he whispered to the empty air. Mara stood in the window, invisible to him, her hand pressed to the glass. "I'm here, baby," she whispered back, though he couldn't hear her. Yet somehow he smiled again, as if he could feel her presence. Mrs. Hellman turned toward her, her expression peaceful. "You're not alone here. The hour holds all those who chose love over fear. Time doesn't forget that." And then Mara felt it, a warmth spreading through her chest. The sadness began to fade, replaced by serenity. The field outside shimmered brighter, the sunlight turning almost white. She looked one last time at her son's smiling face before the vision dissolved into light. From that day forward, the townspeople said strange things about Willow Creek Elementary. The school had been restored, classes resumed, and life moved on. But sometimes, during the quiet hour just before dawn, the old bell rang by itself, even though no one touched it. Those who listened closely claimed they heard faint laughter echoing through the halls, the voices of children, and the gentle hum of a woman's voice whispering, "It's time to go home." Eli, now an adult, became a teacher at the same school years later. On the anniversary of his disappearance, he would place white lilies at the base of the bell tower, just like his mother once did. When he looked up at the tower, the sunlight would catch the metal just right, and for a brief second, he'd swear he saw a figure standing there, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, watching over her class. He never spoke of it aloud. But every October 3rd, he'd whisper softly to the morning air, "I hear you, Mom." And somewhere beyond time, beneath the echo of a bell that still rings, Mara smiled.